Education Study Session. It is January 23rd, 2024, and we're going to go ahead and indicate, first of all, who is here. Karen, why don't you start?
Karen Winder.
Clark Nelson.
Chris Wynn.
Julie Jackson.
Connie Burgess.
Todd Huber.
Rich Nye.
And Nicole McDermott. We are going to excuse Kim Chandler. We believe she's running late as she was up at the Capitol, so I probably would expect to see her in just a little bit. We're going to go ahead and move on to our first agenda item, which is a special education update. We have Dr. Bryce Day here, and he has brought to the board a new proposal from the one that we had received before, as they've done some research, and so we're looking forward to hearing what they have to say.
Thank you for having us and entertaining us while we give you an update on where we are with our kind of service delivery model. It really is two separate issues. We've got our DKFK piece, and then we've got our redesignation from our functional academics and functional life skills classrooms to essential elements classrooms. So they're two separate pieces. I just want to go back and kind of remind you of some of the things we've already talked about. One of the big factors, actually the major factor that's precipitating a big piece of this regarding our diagnostic kindergarten and our functional kindergarten is the passage of HB 477 in the last legislative session with full day kinder. Because of that, and because we as a district so wholeheartedly embraced full day kinder, we were left with our DK, our diagnostic kindergarten, and our functional kindergarten as half day, which meant that simply by the fact that they were students with special education, they were not able to get the same level of services. They weren't entitled to full day simply because they were disabled, right? Which is discriminatory right on the surface. So we have to do away with that. We have to fix that. Then on top of that, we have noticed some data that showed us that we do have a bit of a pipeline that we can directly trace from our DK classrooms all the way to our dropout status. On top of that, we also are continually getting patron feedback, comments about where our students are and how far they are from their home schools, specifically our more severely impaired students with significant cognitive disabilities. And because of our current structure, we have an inability to really be able to address and equalize our class numbers, keep our class sizes pretty equivalent across the district. So getting those kids back to their schools, reducing some transportation times are also some big motivating factors precipitating some of this change. So after going through several phases of seeking feedback from from patrons, from our staff members, we've considered a lot of different options, from doing away with self-contained kindergarten altogether, maintaining our current model but doubling it, reducing our classrooms, increasing our classrooms, going to a co-taught model, going to a purely pull-out model. We've really kind of put everything on the table, trying to consider what is in the best interest of all of our students in Granite and utilizing the expertise of our staff members. We've come up with a proposal that we would like to put forth based on whatever budgetary allocation you feel confident and comfortable giving. Based off our stakeholder feedback, we are proposing to move our functional kindergarten students. Right now we have 20 of them. We want to move them directly in, for next year, we would want to move them directly into essential elements classrooms. And kind of skip over functional kindergarten. We are currently doing some analysis to determine how frequently we have those kids who are in our FK classrooms that don't go into our essential elements to determine if there's a need for kind of in-between placement, if we need to create kind of an in-between classroom. But right now, we're pretty confident that moving them directly into an essential elements class will be to their benefit, as well as reduce the number of transitions that are required for families, because right now we've got families who are attending preschool in one location, then they're going to kindergarten in another location, and then they're going to a third location for their essential elements.
I forgot what DK stands for.
Diagnostic kindergarten.
Okay, and functional kindergarten is, their needs are much more,
Yeah, there are students with
Higher-
significant
higher
cognitive
needs.
disabilities, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Remind us what the essential elements, is that, you're combining those two, I assume, because
Yep.
they're very close together? What's the difference between them right now?
So we've got functional academics and functional life skills. They both access and utilize the essential elements Utah State core standards in their instruction. In theory, our functional academic students are supposed to have higher cognitive abilities versus our FLS or our functional life skills students. In practice, when we look across our classrooms and across the district, they look and function identically. And so right now our district is split into 4 capture areas for one set of classrooms and 5 capture areas that overlap. So we have kids who are getting on a bus, going right past a school that has a unit that could service them to another school. And because of this perceived difference between FA and FLS, and because we only have 4 classrooms in elementary and 5 classrooms, it makes it really hard for us, especially if students live on the far west side or the far east side, to maintain kind of an equal distribution of students. So what we find is big bubbles of kids that we really have no way, unless they live right on a boundary somewhere, of really equalizing and moving them. But that would then again, represent another transition for families that we're concerned about. So we want to, in addition to kind of doing away with the FK classrooms, moving those students straight to our essential elements classrooms, we are proposing that we preserve 10 classrooms for what has been typically our diagnostic kindergarten students. Those would be our students who have mild to moderate learning disabilities. Oftentimes there's some behavioral concerns there as well. We want to preserve those 10 classrooms. We're still not sure what the makeup of those classrooms would be, whether they would be a purely co-taught model. That's what we would prefer. That's what we think is most effective. But there may be some need to have a couple of units that are preserved as more restrictive, truly self-contained, isolating the students from the general population. We're not sure what that need is right now. We're still analyzing that based on the current makeup of our preschool kids. And we're going to go off of what our preschool recommends there. But that's what we would like to do, is we'd like to see 10, for lack of a better term, 10 co-taught classrooms in kindergarten in 10 different locations across the district.
So can you explain, I would think that the 7 FTE and 14 sections, that would mean 7 classrooms.
So right now with,
Like if you had 10 classrooms, you'd need 10 FTE.
we would need 10 FTE, yes. And with moving our 20 FK kids into essential elements, we're going to have to create some additional essential elements classrooms as well. So we're going to have to move right now 2 FTE from the 7 you see up here into our essential elements kind of pot and create more classrooms there. Then we're going to have to add to it. And then we're proposing a truly co-taught model where we have a gen ed teacher and a special education teacher together teaching kind of simultaneously and taking over the class together. We've been piloting a program out at Hunter Elementary that does just that. So we would need additional FTE for special ed teachers, but we'd also need some FTE for gen ed teachers as well to make that work. Did that answer your question? Or create more?
It always creates more with special ed for me, but will you have like a bottom line of how much, I mean, you're proposing here to increase your budget quite significantly. Do you have a bottom line on that yet?
I do, and I've submitted that to the superintendent.
Okay, just
Put into
wondering
the
so that I
budget,
can
yeah.
put it on my radar. Thanks.
Yep. Okay, right now, our average class size for our diagnostic kindergartens across the district is about 6.5 students. Unfortunately, that's not evenly distributed. We've got classrooms on the west side that have 4 kids. We've got one classroom on the east side that has 17. And again, that has to do with just the sheer size and the distribution. We've got one over on the east side and we have more on the west side, and that's created a bit of a conundrum for us to equalize and deliver good, equitable services that way. So increasing the number of sections, distributing them more evenly across the district is going to allow us to get these kids again closer to their homes, smaller class sizes, get them with a certified kindergarten teacher that will help them move through curriculum. And if the problem we're struggling with these students is a lack of seat time and a lack of good modeled peers, this would be a good solution for that. Okay. Right now, we're still, based on budgetary approval, we need to determine which locations and where they're at. We're proposing 10 sites. We're still not sure. I know facilities has been out to look and see which buildings have space. We're also creating heat maps from the preschool, which show us where our distribution is to see where is the most likely that we would be able to place these kids. So that's still up in the air. And again, we're still looking for kind of the other piece of this recommendation is that because we're mixing gen ed kids with special ed kids, it is a special education placement, but if we have students who are struggling who are not eligible for IDEA services or special education, we now have a fluid way of getting them into and receiving some of the additional support that these other kids will be getting. And if we get them in, get them some seat time, and everything gets under control, they've learned from the good models, then we can take them back out. It's much more fluid rather than making them eligible for special education, going through all the steps that we are required to put them into a very restrictive setting, and then having to then demonstrate that they, and doing it in reverse, right, which just takes a lot of time. This gives us a good option for those kids who aren't eligible. And we've got a big bubble of those COVID kids who weren't exposed, weren't socialized, didn't go through Child Find properly with our preschool, and now they're just kind of showing up, and we're having to figure out how to make them eligible, going through the Child Find process while maintaining and honoring their civil rights, but also, protecting the school, protecting personnel, as well as kind of giving them what they need. So what we've typically done is we're going to take those FK students, we're going to put them into their essential elements classrooms. Typically it'll be less than 1 student per school, or per classroom, I should say, with our kindergarten, first and second and third graders, who are currently getting curriculum that is pretty similar to what they would be needing as well, especially a student with a significant cognitive disability. The remaining students, what we traditionally call DK, right now we've got 70. I'm just using like our current year's numbers. We've got 70 of these kids. These equivalent kids would be put into our co-taught kindergarten model, but increasing to 10 sections actually allows us to increase by 30 seats. So we'd actually be able to service more students than we're typically doing now.
I just have a quick question. It says FK is functional kindergarten, correct?
Yes.
They're assigned to classes with first, second, and third graders?
Yeah, our current model is, and that's pretty typical across the state. Okay. So when you put students with a significant cognitive disability into a classroom, simply by the fact that they have a 1%, it's considered a 1% disability. Less than 1% of the population has that disability. We can't fill a classroom with just, well, we could bus all the kids into one place and have just a classroom of kindergartners with significant cognitive disabilities, but that kind of perpetuates the big problem we've got with capture areas that would require that we have all sorts of transportation routes and stuff like that. And it gets them very, very far. Some of these kids would get very far away from their home.
So when they go from the kindergarten, they might stay with the same
They would stay with
peers
the same
first,
teacher,
second,
yeah. Uh-oh, must not be doing a really good job. Okay. As we're looking at this, what we're seeing is that we have a need for probably 5 classrooms on the west side, 3 centrally located, and at least 2 on the east side, with a partnered kindergarten teacher as well. Again, we will be putting some of our students back into a gen ed placement with some wraparound resource services. We're still not sure how many of those students would be necessary, but it does give us the ability right now with a co-taught model to better replicate what would be kind of that typical resource with wraparound services model. So we'll be able to tell whether a student can survive in gen ed on their own or whether they need to move along into a more self-contained setting in their first, second, third grade years, which would be our applied academics classrooms. Our essential elements classrooms, again, we're only talking about 1 student per essential elements classroom when we're done. The new version of DK or our co-taught model would look something like this. We'd have a determining factor which would really largely be based on behavior, adaptive skills, and communication skills. Those are the big pieces. When we pair them with a gen ed kindergarten teacher who is steeped in the curriculum, we're less concerned about whether they'll be able to learn the material because we have a good certified person teaching that, as well as having a special ed teacher teaching alongside of them to adapt the curriculum down if need be, to support with behavior, as well as the educational support personnel that goes along with that, 29-hour paras or full-time contracted paras that would be there to support. Now, what we've done in our pilot classroom is both teachers teach equally within the classroom, and they support all the students equally as if they are theirs. So, for example, you can see right here, this is the gen ed teacher who is teaching the class here. Then she hands off to the special ed teacher. Here's the special ed teacher doing some phonological awareness activities with the kids. And again, she's teaching the whole class. They've worked together to address students' behavioral concerns. Here are 2 different students. One's a special ed student, one is not a special ed student, doing the same behavior modification program. It's a rewards program, and they look the same. So when these kids get together, there is very little difference, at least in the kids' minds of who they are. They are friends, they line up together, they come in together, they do all of that. Sometimes they're pulled out, sometimes there's some personal care issues that we have to take care of, whether that's diapering or feeding or whatever, but for the most part, they attend together and they look just like every other student.
Bryce, quick
Yes.
question. So I think a lot of what you're getting at here is logistical, it's organization focused and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So in this model, what is the proficiency? What have you seen as far as the learning that's happening in this blended classroom?
So the learning we've seen in that classroom from the gen ed teacher is that those kids, and granted this is anecdotal right now, we don't have any good beginning, middle, and end of year data to compare to last year's model. But right now, anecdotally from both the gen ed teacher and the special ed teacher who experienced both models, is that the kids are making equitable, I would say equal progress with their gen ed peers. So some of them are still behind, but some of their gen ed peers are also behind, but it's hard for them to tell which ones. They know which ones are special ed and which ones are not, but when you just look at the scores, it's not always evident which ones are special ed and which ones are not, because they're making that much progress, they're looking like their peers and they're acting like their peers. Did that answer your question? So I would say they're making good progress compared to their peers.
I would
Yes.
just say it's good to have those sped kids reaching up and, wanting to compete. But then we just kind of slightly say, yeah, in the gen ed, some are struggling. And so how are we going to address kids at these different levels? Because regardless of your level, we want all kids to improve. And
So the question you're asking about is how differentiated is the classroom?
right, with a lot of other potential issues that can be going on, and it's great, you know, two full-time, 2 FTE in there is great. So I'm not saying this can't work or it won't work or anything like that. I'm just trying to look at, is the action, I mean, at the end of the day, we're here to help kids learn and grow, and we believe every kid can learn and grow. So that's why I'm kind of trying to say, okay, are these kids actually learning with this model? So that's kind of the crux of my question.
Okay, well, I mean, anecdotally, I can tell you that kind of from testimony from both the gen ed and the special ed teacher, they feel like this is a highly effective model. The kids are making much more progress than what Kate, the teacher who last year was in a fully self-contained classroom, felt. So she felt like her kids this year are making a lot more progress. They're spending more time with their gen ed peers. Their behavior is more under control because they're getting good models, because they're getting good instruction from a highly qualified teacher.
So Bryce, just to clarify, so I guess you said the gen ed kids are progressing. Are they comparably to the year before, though? Are we seeing the same growth in the gen ed kids when they're in that shared classroom?
So anecdotally, they are performing on par with the kindergartens at Hunter Elementary, which are not integrated.
With the other ones? Okay, thank you.
So if you're getting at, are the special ed kids pulling those kids down? The answer to that is no, they're not. Now, this model that we're proposing came about through a lot of outreach from our staff. We held a staff listening session, we recorded it, we sent it out. We pulled together a stakeholder feedback group that consisted of 9 essential elements teachers. Do we have that on a slide? No, here we go. Okay. We pulled together a stakeholder feedback group that was 26 individuals. We did a call for volunteers, so we just took everybody who volunteered. I didn't have to sort through them because we only got 26. We broke them into 4 separate groups and asked them to design a program. And each of these 4 groups kind of designed their own program. And based on that program, you know, we took, and it was very interesting to look at the feedback and the programs they designed because some of them were very contradictory, right? Which tells me no matter how I go about this, we're going to make somebody mad. Some of them wanted only 6 classrooms. Some of them asked for 10 classrooms. Some of them wanted only the kindergarten teacher and the special ed teacher. Some of them wanted almost one-to-one, you know, adult support in the classroom. So it was kind of all over the board. But based on that, we did come to the conclusion that we need to provide more classroom support, not less, and that we needed a larger number of classrooms than we currently are able to house. So that's what brought about kind of this proposal. Now, when it comes to community outreach, we did send out both emails and letters to our EE families about their redesignation. Those went out in October. We held 4 different listening sessions where I went out, me and Kyle both went out to different locations throughout the district. We held one here at the GEC, out at Matheson Junior, Kearns Junior. We did one on Zoom for parents who didn't want to travel. To hear what their concerns were. We had several staff members that came to those as well to give us feedback. And then again, based on all that feedback, the concerns that we heard, the biggest concern we heard from our patrons, from our parents and families, was this concern about the continual transition between locations when it comes to their students who are in the EE classrooms. That some of these parents in 4 years had 4 different schools, which was a hardship on them, right? And we understand that, and that's one of the things we're trying to address. From our faculty and staff concerns, they were all kind of centered on kindergarten behavior, mostly about students who've come and not gone through Child Find, and how can we make Child Find faster and get kids into locations away from their current buildings as quickly as possible. So that's where we decided we need to create probably more spots than what we have. And that's kind of where our model came. Now, there are a lot of things at play based on it always comes down to logistics, right? How many bus routes we can conceivably create, how much budgetary allotment we can get based on the legislature and things like that. But ultimately, right now, we're proposing 10 classrooms and redesignating all of our EE classrooms, or all of our FA and FLS classrooms as EE classrooms. We have sent out letters letting parents know where we want to reassign those students, which would be closer to their homes. We have received feedback from lots of patrons, and we are reaching out. Some of them understand and don't like all the transitions, but they want to stay in their current location, so we're working with them. I've been in contact with Prevention Student Placement through the open enrollment process to see how we can help these families navigate our system so that they can find and be able to get their students the services and the locations they need. So that's where we're at with that. Ultimately, our next steps are to make a formal announcement. We're up against a bit of a deadline because we do need to start staffing. We need to start ordering materials, which do not come quickly. We need to identify locations. We need to determine if we have enough buses, if we need to, order more buses, if we need to create new routes, what that's going to look like. But we would like to we had initially wanted to make an announcement about what this new model would be in January. So by the end of this month, we were hoping that we would be able to then post for positions for the co-taught classrooms as well as the additional essential elements classrooms before we go to the surplus process in March, so that we know how many additional individuals we're going to have to hire in addition to the folks we're going to reassign to our kindergarten classrooms. We need to purchase all the materials, which includes additional grade level kindergarten, language arts, math, science materials, as well as furniture, those kinds of things, as well as I need to pull together a stakeholder feedback group to start designing professional development if we're going to go with the true co-taught model of what that looks like. We're planning on utilizing our staff members' current expertise to kind of create that, as well as getting input from USBE's special education department. They have a co-teaching specialist. So those are kind of where we're at now. The action steps that we're waiting on is final approval for the budget to know how much money I really do have, so I can put together, I know how many teachers I really can hire, how many bus routes we really do need to create. We are still waiting on some of our numbers from preschool. How many truly self-contained students in a very restrictive setting do we really need? And then which locations actually have space? So that's where we're at now. What additional questions do you have for me?
I have a question. The schools you choose to have these, I know you're concerned about space, but I'm also concerned about those schools in particular, what their needs are already. So like putting maybe additional kids in a school that's already struggling with their behaviors or whatever. Is that something you're considering in those
Yes,
schools?
it
Or
is.
tell me kind of what you're looking at in a school.
What
if you're gonna choose.
So what we would be asking for is 10 additional kindergarten FTE. So rather than moving them into a school and then just taking one of the kindergarten teachers, what we're proposing is, no, we hire a whole nother teacher to do that, and then skimming off of those classrooms off the top. So it actually would lower the kindergarten class size in those schools. So it would actually be a benefit to those schools.
And then are you like working with the principal at that school to, see what that would look like? Or how would that be, I guess, implemented into the school? Like when would the teachers know? When would that, Because following your model here, because it would affect not just those kindergarten teachers, but the whole school, So I'm just wondering, like, teachers or principals are working with their community councils to figure out their FTE for their other students. So I'm just wondering if how are you?
Well, we need to, right now, I don't even know how many schools to approach because we don't know, I don't have a budgetary number to know how much FTE I can actually hire. So I am in a bit of a holding pattern right now to even be able to reach out to principals, because the minute me and Steve show up in a building, everybody starts losing their minds because they know something's coming. So we just need to, I need a number before I even know, because that's also going to determine which locations I start to approach and to look at. I know Steve already has a list of like open classrooms. I know he has been out in other capacities, but he's also been keeping his eyes on that to see which locations have rooms that are close and in near proximity so that all the kindergartners can be together.
Dr. Nye, and maybe John also, I was at one of my schools this week, this month, volunteering in their, I can't remember if it was FL or DK kindergarten, and one of the things that they were saying is that they were so thankful that they had an assistant principal at that school because they spend so much time just working with the kids in their classrooms, so they need someone else on the rest of the building. And so just wonder if you see any impacts from admin from this decision.
I mean, the short answer is our administrator distribution formula, if you will, takes things like this into consideration when it comes to weighting. And so when you think of the different categories of what determines whether or not a school gets an assistant principal, a full-time assistant principal versus a half-time versus an intern, that we're really talking what is the enrollment of the school, what percentage of free and reduced lunch the students have, and then things like this in terms of the units that they have is also weighted. And there's one other category, mobility, that was the other one. What percentage of the school's population is highly mobile? And so that does factor into it. I would say at this point, I would think any principal would love additional administrative help. And we do work through that, and the board has been good in providing more admin positions budgetarily. But we're still in a position where there's a greater request than we currently have the ability to fill with our current budgets. But does that answer the question in terms of yes and? Yes, if we have a situation where we have a school with more special classes, that is taken into consideration for more administrative help.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it sounds like those details haven't been nailed down yet because we're still, looking for approval of the budgets and things, all of this other stuff. So it sounds like that's not necessarily nailed down. I just want to make sure that we don't have an overwhelmed principal somewhere. That's what I want to make sure of. Because then that trickles into every classroom, right?
Right.
Overwhelmed teacher, overwhelmed students.
Yep.
I have a question on teachers. So this is a huge change for some of our kindergarten teachers. And, we started out the year kind of with a shortage of kindergarten teachers. So I'm wondering, I have a couple questions on teacher impact. First of all, is this going to make it easier or harder to fill our slots next fall? That's one of my questions. The other question is for our existing kindergarten teachers that may not choose to get behind these changes, are we working with them to see maybe what grade they want to move to? Maybe they don't want to teach this model, but they're like, you know what, I've always wanted to teach third grade. Are we going to be meeting with those teachers and laying out options, or is it just kind of I'm a big advocate of not just saying you will do.
No, our intention is not to make anybody do anything they don't want to do. So what we would do, if we were able to get all the positions that we're hoping for and that we really do move forward with a kind of co-top model, we would essentially dissolve our DK program. And then we would allow those teachers to apply for if they want to do co-top, they can apply for that position, assuming they get hired, or they could, or then they would get put into the surplus pool, and then they would be able to, self-select based on the available positions within the district and their certifications. So we wouldn't make them do anything that they didn't want to do.
And my other question is this going to, do you anticipate it being easier? Or, kindergarten, let's all be clear, it's its own unique.
It is, and it has been historically one of our.
And so do you think, if I'm a new teacher and I'm looking at different districts, is this going to attract kindergarten teachers to us or kind of push them away?
If we can do it before surplus, before everybody gets dumped into the big pool, we'll be more likely to get them. We're also hoping that we'd be able to, based on budgetary allotments, maybe offer additional compensation for doing this model, which might attract higher quality and other people from outside the district.
And if I may, we're also working with HR to see if there's some year trading incentives or things like that that we could do to lure teachers to our district.
Is the professional learning, are those days before the official contract day? And would they be compensated for that, or is that in lieu of the professional learning that?
No, we would want those to be in addition to.
Okay.
And at a compensated rate, because we intentionally put professional learning, not professional development, because we feel like as we build these teams, they need to be just that, teams, and they need to come up with a plan together. And they need to, so that they're moving as one kind of unified body, not just one teacher doing this and one teacher doing that.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, and you probably said this and perhaps I missed it, what class size would these be? And how many of the special ed would be there, and then the general ed? What
So we're looking at a maximum class size of 20.
Okay.
And we would start off with 10 gen ed students and 10 special ed students, probably less than that because we need to leave some room for growth. So it would be probably look more like 17 or 18. And then we would look to, if we have move-ins or if we had students who became eligible and we needed to move into a more restrictive setting, we would do that way.
Okay, so obviously I'm not really familiar. So how, with it being kindergarten, how do they get placed in there? Is it from their preschool experience? Is it, like you said, the add-on, they go into a regular gen class and then they're moved into that? Can you just explain?
Actually, I'll let Kyle speak to that. He's in the midst of that right now. I'm going to move.
Check. Oh, I didn't try it. But good question. So the majority of our students that are in a special class for kindergarten came through our preschool program. So our preschool offers gen ed preschool, special education preschool, both part-time services and full-time services. So in about this time of year, the first one's coming up, we have these meetings where we go through with the preschool folks and their coordinators who are like their special ed teachers come and talk to my committee and describe individual students. It's multiple days, the entire day, where we go through and John Doe this and Jane Doe this, and we go through and we talk through all those preschool students and choose of our offerings which one would be the best kindergarten class. So of our 70 students that are in special class right now for kindergarten, I would say probably, and as a guess, 55 came through the preschool program, so far more than half. And then some others just show up to school for kindergarten having never been evaluated. The school team gets to know them and realizes, okay, this student has some significant needs, evaluate, and sometimes we place them into that class then. But the majority come through that preschool, and so they already have an IEP, and we're able to look at their assessment and their progress and make a placement decision. The same thing would happen, just like Bryce is saying, we'd want to have most of the COTOC classes filled with our kids coming through preschool, save a few seats for those who show up in kindergarten and need extra help. Yeah.
So if I have a kid who's a child who's starting kindergarten next year, either my child goes to a school where this program is, there's no program, which is, and the program will be called Essential Elements, am I correct?
Yeah, Essential Elements for our students with higher needs, or COTOT would be the name of the kindergarten program
Okay.
we're discussing.
So either that program doesn't exist at my school and my principal works with the community to determine class size and everyone in my class is a traditional student, or I'm at a school that has the COTOP program, in which case there will be one class that my child might get in that has some kids who are on an IEP, but has a lower class size capped at 20 for sure, and 2 teachers, or they could be in just a traditional classroom. Have I got that right, that those are, that's what it would look like for me?
Yeah. Yeah, so
But also, you have to keep in mind that there would be, in any gen ed kindergarten class, there's going to be students there with IEPs. Oh, that doesn't work. There we go. I'm going to do that. How about that? There are students in every gen ed class that have IEPs.
Right, I guess thanks for that clarification. So this would be students with more serious needs.
yeah, kind of think of it as levels. Our students with,
Yeah.
with the least needs would be in a gen ed class with a small portion of their day pulled out for resource.
And
Next
then-
level up, co-taught, next level up from that, essential elements.
But there is still a group of students whose needs are so severe that they would not be involved in this, and they would be somewhere else, Hartbettson or something like that?
Yes, so gen ed with resource, co-taught, essential elements, and Hartvickson. The most significant students being placed at Hartvickson.
Okay, I was confused. I thought co-taught and essential elements were the same.
They're not.
No,
That is not. I get co-taught, yeah, maybe again, go through essential elements. And you just named those in order of how many interventions we
How
would
significant the
make.
child's needs
In
are.
service time, I mean, there's a lot of, this is why people don't like special education, because it's messy.
It really is, and so thank you for
yeah.
being patient while I work.
So you can't think of it as like levels of intervention as much as levels of, the idea of placement is a principle that we use in special education that drives what we call LRE, or least restrictive environment. And it's based on a couple of different things: the types of services a student needs, the intensity of the services the student needs, the location and benefits of having access to peers, and the type of curriculum they need. All those mixed together generate what we call placement. So our typical placements are like gen ed with resource, then we would have a special class, and that can look a lot of different ways. We've got our, outside of kindergarten, we have applied academics, we have essential elements, and then our most restrictive is what we call special school, where there is no benefit for a student to be accessing or interacting with his peers, or it's dangerous for them to interact with their peers. We pull those students and send them to a special school. In this case, it would be Harvickson. Does that make sense? So it's not necessarily about interventions. It's kind of this mixture of all things together to make a special sauce.
I forgot it's that about the least restrictive environment. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so the essential elements is more restrictive environment than the co-taught.
Yeah,
Yes.
so our kindergartners that are placed in essential elements have low cognitive abilities, and it's pretty clear when they come out of preschool if that's what they need. So when you think of an essential elements placement for a kindergartner, you can imagine like an FLS, a functional life skills, or a functional academics class that exists now for first graders, putting kindergartners in there with them.
And so when you were talking about the essential elements class, that's when you were saying the average class size would be 6.5?
No.
We wish it was that low.
Yes,
No.
we do.
That's when we said the average class, the average school that houses essential elements right now, so like in your neighborhood, like a Woodstock, Wilson's on the east side, those schools would increase by 1 student. As they've had K through 5, or excuse me, they've had 1 through 5. We're proposing that they now take on K through 5 in their essential elements programs. With the
okay.
name change. Yeah, the number that you said, the 6.5, that's our current average class size in a diagnostic kindergarten.
Okay. And students who are DK or FA? Is the other
FK.
one? FK. Where will those students go? The DK go to?
The end of the year, that's why it's diagnostic. There's a meeting on each of the students who's in DK, and I'm involved in those. And then there's different options. Some of them go to gen ed with resource, some of them go to an applied academics, and some would go to an essential elements class.
So each of them will be looked at individually and will go to the place where and who else is involved in that decision? All the people on the IEP team?
Yeah, the teacher has the most significant voice on that team. Teacher, administrator, school psych, coordinator from my department, and then me.
Okay, thank you. It's really helpful.
I just have a quick question. So the EE classes are already formed, and we're just adding to that an average of 1 student per class?
Yeah,
Yeah.
with a name change.
With the name
Currently, the
change.
names are functional academics and functional life skills. We're going to combine those
So
and
that's
call them
special.
EE, but they already exist.
But they
yes.
exist, so we're not changing that per se. We're changing the name and we're changing that they might get an additional student average.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we have not traditionally placed kindergartners at Harvickson. That will probably change because we've housed them in our FK units.
But it's not just, you had these two programs in the same building and now we're combining them. It could be a program here and a program here. So these students are now going to go to another school, or both students will go to another school.
Yeah, there's going to be some
Some
overlap where
crossover.
we're going to get them to wherever is closest to their home. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a lot of shakeup.
Yeah, about between 40 and 45% of our students, elementary students with significant disabilities, will have a new school assignment next year. So it's a tough transition. That's hard for kids, it's hard for schools, it's hard for teachers, but the long-term benefit we believe in, that they're closer to home, closer to their neighborhood peers, shorter bus rides,
Fewer
more included.
transitions.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you've provided some budgetary estimates to the superintendent. Can you, Rich and Todd, comment on where are we going to come up with the funding to, and what is the funding, what does it look like, and how would we be able to hire all these additional kindergarten teachers to fill the need?
So there are several options that are available that we're still weighing the merits on. We can look through our Title I programs and see how those determinations shake out. We can look at our at-risk programs as the legislative session comes to its close and there is increase in that particular distribution channel. We can look at, because of the urgency, we can take a look at one-time funding that would bridge until we can have a full solution tested and in place. So think of it as like a pilot, if you will. So those are offhands. The rest would be just going through the regular budget process, and it competes with every other idea and pressure that we're feeling in the budget.
The other part of this, in terms of the equation of how much funding will this cost, depends, of course, on the scenario, but there's also a realization that we have half-day kinder students who will now be receiving a full WPU, a weighted pupil unit from the state. And so there is some, if you will, revenue for increasing the number of full weighted pupil units, because currently they're only half. And so there are some offsetting costs in terms of what that looks like. And so we're sharpening our pencils, identifying the utility of the options, and being able to give, and we'll be able to provide the board a number to the
Okay,
effort.
I don't know if I'm the only one thinking this, but I'm sure some listeners at home are like, can you just give a number? Like, what are we talking here? How many millions of dollars are we going to need to find? Because, I'd love to think we have a money tree in our backyard or here on, GEC campus, but the reality is we work with a finite amount of money. And so I'm just curious, even a ballpark, what are these changes gonna cost?
Like, when I'm adding it, I didn't think it was $1 million. So we're not in the ballpark of each other at all.
So what's the order of magnitude?
Ooh, there's serious discussion going on.
Well, hey. So there's been different proposals on how the cost structure would be presented and how it would come together. I think some of the elements in here, we're looking at something that's probably north of $1 million, $1.5 million. It depends on, so we have the FTE that we're talking about, the additional 10 FTE, but there's also the incentive to bring teachers into the program and be willing to participate. So that has to be determined as well.
See, Julie, I wasn't that far off with my million.
That's funny, because I was like, Karen thought several millions, and I said 1 million. I thought I was the one who had it right. Maybe we were in the same
Oh, I was
ballpark.
thinking like $1 million or more. Anyway, you can be right, Julie. It's all right.
Chris, did you have something? All right. Any other questions? Okay. All right, thank you so much for being here.
So these guys await approval from superintendent. We do not, we are
Well-
we are informed now.
We're informed,
Yes, okay.
yes.
Gentlemen, good luck.
And as Rich said, some of this depends on what happens during the session as well. So we're kind of in a limbo in that regard, as far as what our responsibility is. And yeah.
I appreciate that you're taking that approach of like, look, we got to make sure we know what's happening first.
Yeah, I think the dependent variable in this, or the constant, if you will, is the fact that we do have half-day kindergarten for students with disabilities. And since we have offered full-day kindergarten across our schools, to not offer it to our students with disabilities we are discriminatory, if you will, per that language, against students with disabilities. So in terms of those options, it is yes, we need to do something. It's how are we taking the measured approach to the right something in a way that, and in this case, this scenario, this COTOP model really is trying to strike that balance, saying, yes, we need our special education kiddos in full-day kindergarten, and two, how do we do it within the existing structures in a way that meets the needs of both general ed and special ed students without necessarily being cost prohibitive. Because there is that forcing function that we do need to take action on full-day kindergarten for special education students.
So Leslie, I know Bryce already left, but can you speak to, I know as we went and visited Hunter Elementary, some of the parents were saying, well, I don't know that I would put my kid in all day because they have appointments in the afternoon. Do we have any sense of, as they talk to parents, of who feels that way? Like, are these DK kids going to be in full day? Are we going to see that offered? Are we going to see the kids come? Or are we going to end up with classrooms with 10 Jet-In kids and 2 DK kids full-time?
And that's hard to predict due to the fact that we don't know what preschool kids are coming in and how their parents are going to feel, because all we can do is base it on the ones that we have this year and just talking anecdotally about, do they want to, do you want a full day? Do you want a half day? But to me, the indication that Bryce and Kyle have given me is that they're excited about having them full day and that they want them there full day. And we'd also be flexible in every classroom that if they had additional appointments or additional services, that they'd just release them whenever they needed to. And do you have additional things, Rick?
Well, we can look at gen ed this year. We know overall 90+% of those opted for a full day. There's very few who in the gen ed large group chose not to have full day. So I would think that mirrors that fairly closely.
All right. If there's no further questions, we will go ahead and move on. We have on our agenda an executive session for the purpose of character and competence. With that, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we move into executive session for the purpose of character and competence.
I'll second.
And confidence.
All right, we have a motion and a second to move into executive session for the purpose of character and competence of an individual. We need to have a roll call vote for this. We'll go ahead and start with Connie. Will you please state your name and